folks. We are live this morning. It is about 10:08 a.m. Central Time this Wednesday, the 7th day of October, 2009. Where is the time going? A special edition show today because we had found out here not too long ago that the Germans had decided that the electronic voting machines were unconstitutional in Germany, following a path now of countries around the world who have decided that these, may I say, evil voting machines are stealing the rights away from the people. So it is a fascinating development. One of the gentlemen who helped make this happen will be joining us here on the program in about 20 minutes from Germany. He is a physicist, Dr. Ulrich Wiesner. And also with us today on the program is Bev Harris. We're going to go to her in just a minute. And Kathleen Wynne, handcountedpaperballots.org, who brought us this story. Tell us more about Ulrich Wiesner and what happened in Germany before we go to Bev.
Well, basically, his father and himself, they filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the legal basis for the deployment of these voting machines, that they did not comply with the principles of democracy and the public nature of elections. And they called into question the fact that people could not see their votes counted publicly. And that was a right, a human right, as Bev calls it, and I think rightfully so, because ultimately your votes are counted in secret by these machines. And so at the end of the day, the courts basically decided two things. The citizens should not be required to have a technical expertise to see if their vote was counted properly, and two, that votes must be counted in public, which is the whole basis of an election, the public nature of elections. The only secrecy in elections should be the casting of the vote, but the counting should be out in the public so that any citizen can come in and see their vote counted. And I think that should be done here, don't you?
Absolutely. What was the media's role in this decision in Germany? Were the media on board with this? Because that's kind of, as you know, one of the big problems we have here. The media won't cover the story. They won't cover the facts, the information. And I think that if the American people, to a man, to a woman, knew the reality of what these voting machines can do, and we often say he who hacks last hacks best, but if the American people knew about this, they wouldn't stand for it.
Right. There's never been a real debate with American people about public counting of the vote and the machine votes. This was rammed through with the Help America Vote Act to make money for the lobbyists who worked for these voting companies to make money, billions in fact. But in Germany, I think that it got more notice from their press because the German Constitutional Court made this decision. So that got a lot of attention because it gave it credibility. But at the end of the day, their parliament member, I found in the internet, a member of the German parliament, Max Stadler, he stated that he doubted, before the court's decision was made, he doubted that the court would rule in favor of Dr. Wiesner. He said that he personally preferred paper ballots as it would inspire confidence in the electorate, and they possessed a certain charm, which I thought that was interesting. But he argued that the issue was a policy question, not a constitutional one, but the court disagreed with him.
They control the media exposure for the candidates. They control the money, but we can't let them control the actual votes. It was Uncle Joe Stalin that said, it's not who counts the votes that counts. It's not who votes that counts. It's who counts the votes. And that could never be more realistic than what we see here today. And if we look at and see that we have no choice almost in our candidates, that the media is unfair in how they treat independent candidates or even outside-the-box candidates. So they give us these phony choices, and then they rig the elections. It almost seems as if it's just a big nightmare, but this is reality in this country, folks. And again, it's just our job today, Kathleen, to try to get this information out to people and say, look, if Germany can do this, we can do it.
Well, what's the difference between their democracy and ours? Transparency is transparency, and I had to find this guy, and through jumping through a couple of hoops, I managed to find him based on the fact that I worked at Black Box Voting, is why he contacted me. So the rest is history, as they say.
Speaking of which, let's bring up our good friend Bev Harris from blackboxvoting.org. They have been leading the charge here for years and years and years to reveal the truth, the real information, the technical information about these electronic voting machines. Bev, are you with us?
I am. And, Jack, I'm so glad you brought up some of the points you did, because tying in with this story, you know, the largest voting machine company in the United States just bought the second largest, which gives them 75% of the votes to count in concealment. But they are actually owned by a media consortium. So let's look at this. We have a media consortium, the Omaha World Companies, which own both radio stations and newspapers all over the place. And then they own, in turn, a voting machine company, which now has a monopoly on concealed counting of the votes. So I think we're getting very close to something that really represents the end of democratic elections as we know it.
Bev, why is it that, and I've been asking you the same question since I think you were first on in 2002, I believe, why is it that people just don't seem to care about this? Or is it, maybe I'm always locked into this illusion because we care about it so much, but it just doesn't seem like it's much of an issue, especially now that the Democrats are in office and they have the trifecta. Can you help my listeners understand why this isn't the hottest, most important issue in politics today?
Well, two things. One is, of course, the media has not been doing its job, and in fact, it's doing the job for the vendors. There's a vendor lobbyist group that has been meeting with the media and kind of really twisting their arm to spin the story their way. I still don't understand that. A reporter is supposed to cover the story, not work for the vendors. But beyond that, very early on when I began exposing the story and I got on your show and so forth, other kind of pseudo-election integrity groups came out and started hijacking the message into something else. They started hijacking the message into, well, it's okay to count with concealment if we have a paper trail. Well, it's okay to count with concealment if we spot check a random small percentage after the fact. And bear in mind, with chain of custody, you don't even know what you're spot checking. So they then, in turn, were supported by certain components of the industry, and they got a lot of press. What they really did was switch the message from one of public counting of the vote over to, if we have a paper trail, all is fine. Well, if you have a paper trail, but it's counted in concealment, it's not fine at all. In fact, the real core issue has to be public counting. If you hand count and you do it behind closed doors in secrecy, that's not democratic. So what we have to keep pulling people back to, and frankly, the message got hijacked away. I was so naive back then, I didn't realize that one of the first things that happens when citizens bring forward really important evidence that other citizens will understand at a gut level is that they will create a pseudo group that will kind of steer the message off to the side. And that's really what happened with this, where people would say, oh, if we elect a Democrat, everything will be okay. Don't worry about the voting. Oh, if we have a paper trail, don't worry if the paper trail is counted in concealment. It'll be okay. And believe it or not, an awful lot of people bought that line, and it kind of drowned out the real issue, which is public counting.